What's up everyone, I'm Dave Mech and welcome to a new tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to show you the easiest method to connect these two instruments together. And there's no manual reading or looking up CC messages at all. It's very easy to set up. So before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like this video and hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload a new video. Okay, let's go. So I've been using these devices for, I think for 4 years or something. When the Digitone was released, I immediately got it and started using it together with the DT. And I started using the MIDI tracks of the Digitakt to modulate some extra stuff on the Digitone. Also for pseudo sidechain compression, for instance, to make it have this ducking effect on synth sounds that I programmed on the Digitone. And that way they more and more felt like they were one instrument when using together. And personally, MIDI is very nice. It's a very interesting protocol, obviously. But the downside often is that you have to look into in a manual to look through tables of CC messages to get the specific CC messages that you want to control with a MIDI device. And the same applies to the Digitakt and Digitone. If I have a track and I want to have one of the MIDI LFOs on the Digitone, for instance, modulating one of the specific parameters on a Scene 1 page, I'd have to open the manual, look up the CC messages for that, go to the amp page, dial in the right CC message, and then start playing with it. You can standardize this overly. You can kind of decide, okay, I'm going to only modulate specific parameters and set this up on multiple MIDI tracks and have this template ready. But now you have to remember, okay, which of the values was which of the parameters after a month of use or 2 months of use, or maybe you haven't used the instruments for 1 or 2 weeks and you start diving into them again. You now have to remember, okay, which of the values here on this page are controlling which parameter. Maybe you have written this down on a piece of paper, which you now have to look up to see which of the values corresponds to which parameter. This all doesn't seem like a very nice workflow where I'm actually using them as an instrument. I'm looking stuff up and have to, remember stuff that I don't want to remember. I want to remember how to play them. So what is the solution? The solution is actually very, very simple. The way that we're going to connect these two devices is, in a way, a little bit limited. On the other hand, it provides a lot of flexibility and some things that you wouldn't be able to do when using the regular MIDI CC messages. Don't worry, I'm going a little bit fast right now, but I'm going through this step by step, how to set the MIDI settings up and how to apply everything. And I'm gonna give you a couple of examples as well. So first of all, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about these things: PB, AT, MW, and BC. And they mean pitch bend, aftertouch, mod wheel, and breath control. This is the key to a manual-less and smooth interplay between these two instruments. What you can do on the Digitone is, if you go to the setup, the sound setup of each of these tracks, so by pressing Func plus setup, I can now scroll down and you will see these things: velocity mod, modulation wheel, breath controller, aftertouch. And if you go in, let's say, the modulation wheel, you will get this modulation matrix. And here you can set up 4 destinations, and each with their individual value, and then controlling it with the mod wheel. So I could set up value 1 as a target filter frequency, for instance, and have this second control the LFO 2 depth. And I can determine how deep that modulation goes, and then control it with the mod wheel. And you can also see how this provides quite a bit of fine-tune, because if I set it like this range is now very smooth. It's very, very useful. And I can set up 4 parameters per page. And we have breath controller, we have aftertouch, and we have velocity mod and pitch bend. And we can control these all from here. Obviously, velocity mod we can also use by programming velocity in the sequencer. Also a very nice trick to explore. The cool thing about this approach is that I can simply set this up per pattern, have different destinations set up with specific depths that I want, the specific ranges that I want, and save that with the pattern. And each pattern can have different destinations, different settings, different depths, and I never have to think about it again. I can just set up a pattern on each of these instruments that correspond to each other, and I can forget about how I've set it up exactly and just control these parameters. They're set up in a way that it sounds musical to me, so I don't have to look anything up. I don't have to remember any CC messages or which value means which parameter, etc. And now I can go to the LFO, a MIDI LFO. I can set up the destination, pitch bend, aftertouch, mod wheel, and breath controller. So I can even set up an LFO or multiple LFOs to control this value, controlling the other values. And that's where things get fun. Let's walk through how to set it up. It's actually very easy. So first of all, we're going to go to the Digitone and we're going to go to this settings page and we're going to set up the MIDI config. And now I'm going to go to, let's first go to sync. I'm going to make sure that the clock receive, clock send, just make sure that the way I've set it up right now is that the Digitakt out, MIDI out goes into the MIDI in of the Digitone, right? So I want to have clock receive and transport receive on in this case. Other than that, we can leave this off. Program change, I don't use it myself. If you do use it, then turn it on, obviously. Now go to the port config. And here, make sure that the input from is set to MIDI or MIDI plus USB, one of those two. And turn off receive notes, because I'm not going to sequence the Digitone from the Digitakt. That makes no sense to me. I'll use the Digitone itself to sequence itself. And turn on receive CC NR PN. Yeah. And now let's move back to channels. And we're going to set up the channels like 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure that the MIDI channels are off. Generally, I always turn off any MIDI CC, MIDI messages or MIDI control things that I don't use to make sure that there's no oddities or things that go wrong, right? So these are the other settings. Okay, that's the Digitone side. Very easy. Yeah. Now on the Digitakt side, we need to set up a couple of things. So we're gonna start with the MIDI track A. So we're gonna control this track. And that's track 1, which is set to channel 1, right? MIDI channel 1. So we're gonna press funk. We're on the source page here. Press funk and press the encoder to turn on channel. And we can select the MIDI channel. So in this case, we're going to choose channel 1. And now we see all these other crosses. I want to control the mod wheel in this case, the mod wheel modulation matrix. Yeah. So I'm going to, again, hold funk and press this. And now you see I can control the mod wheel. And I can demonstrate this by going to the setup, the sound setup of this track 1. And again, you can hold funk and press the arrows down to scroll through this list quicker, because you'll be going back and forth quite a lot in the beginning. So I'm going to the modulation wheel setup, and you can now see that when I turn this up, it's going up and down. Yeah. I'm actually going to check if I have something in the second LFO. Yeah, it's the A level. Okay. And this is the filter envelope. Well, okay. So I'm going to go back to the modulation wheel and I'm going to set this depth. I'm going to set this to the mult because that will be a bit more obvious. Now, if I play this. Cool, right? So you can hear that I'm actually controlling the multiplier of the LFO2 and the filter frequency. So let's maybe go to the filter, set the filter more closed, so the effect will be more obvious. I'm going back to the modulation matrix. And make sure that in the case of the mult, for instance, that the depth is not too high, because there are not that many values for the mult parameters. So you can actually see that you can use this as a macro control. I can control multiple parameters at the same time. So maybe set the third to filter resonance. And I'm going to set the, let me see, this one to AB level. And let's see how this sounds. I'm going to set the mult. So a good workflow to see what the maximum value is. So you have a range of, the maximum value should still sound musical, right? So I'm going to set this to the max value. I'm actually something like this. Bit of excessive, but it's also to give you a little bit of an idea how you can use this as a macro control as well. So this is, as you can see, this is very easy. And now I can save this with the pattern and this as well. Save the project, and now this will be saved and linked to each other in a way. And I don't have to remember, okay, which of the what is controlling this. You know, I just know that I've set this up in a way that makes sense for this pattern. So I can just control this. It's saved with the pattern, set and forget. This is how I like to work in general. And again, this is, this makes life a lot easier to control those two devices together. This is basically the whole video. This is the explanation, and this is where I can kind of quit. But I'm also going to show you how you can use the LFO to use pseudo sidechain compression. Usually you would kind of use one of these LFOs of the track itself, but the nice thing of this approach is that you actually free up these two LFOs for the sound design part, and then you can use one of these LFOs for the pseudo sidechain compression trick to so you know, you have these separated and it works really well. And I'm going to show you how to set that up. It's also not that difficult. So for this we're going to go to the second the MIDI B track. I'm going to go to the source page and again activate this channel, set it to 1, and I'm going to activate breath control in this case. I'm going to use breath control for the pseudo sidechain compression trick, and that's it. I don't have to set up any CC messages whatsoever. Now I'm going to go on the Digitone. I'm going to go to the setup page. I'm going to go down to breath controller. And here I can see I already set something up. So I'm gonna use aftertouch because I don't want to mess this up. I'm gonna actually show you what I did with the breath controller as well as a macro control. And I use an external MIDI controller for that, by the way. But for now, let's go set this up to amp level, amp volume, right? And we're gonna set this to a negative value. So when this is modulated in a positive way, right, the modulation depth is going up, it will modulate the amp volume down. And on the Digitakt, we're going to go to the LFO page, and we're going to set the destination to aftertouch. Yes. We're going to set the mode to 1, trig mode 1. I'm going to set the wave to exponential and then set the depth to something positive. I tend to, for the sidechain compression, I tend to use the mult in BPM mode. so that it is part of the BPM. And if I speed up the groove, the sidechain compression, how it works with the groove will stay the same. I generally set the mult to either 8 or 16 and then use the speed as a form of a sort of a fine tune control. Yeah, so this is the big change, and then speed we can use for fine tuning. So it has to be actually triggered, right? So we're going to go into grid recording mode, and we can just enter tricks like this. And I'm not, that's why I turned off the note receive, because I'm not actually playing notes from the Digitone to play notes on the from the Digitakt to play notes on the Digitone. This will just trigger the LFO. You can also use log tricks, but this is just quicker. I don't have to turn on the LFO trigger individually per trick, etc. So just using these tricks is fine. So let's see how that sounds. It's muted. This is also nice. So the track is muted now, and if I unmute it, you can immediately see that it starts modulating. Yeah. So a cool thing is when you're entering a break, for instance, you can actually mute the sidechain compression. Yeah. So first, I'm gonna go to the other MIDI track. I'm gonna open up the mod wheel. Will be a bit more obvious. I'm also gonna turn off the delay because it will be a bit more obvious that I'm sidechain compression. I'm gonna go to MIDI track B. So if I turn the mult to 4, you can hear that it turns almost silent. See? Turn to 8. Get a nice pumping effect. I can even maybe make it even more clear. I'm gonna go to the setup. And generally, I tend to set this up that this is set to the max, and then I can control the fine tuning here. So this is no sidechain compression, this is max. And now I can set the mult to 16, for instance. This way, it's kind of very snappy. I can fine tune it with the speed, set it a bit slower, for instance. Very slow, you will hear. Nice. So I can switch to the mod wheel modulation. I've also set up the breath controller. This is part of my live set, so it's a bit more musical. So normally this is set to something like this. So this is the trick, really. This is all there is to it. And again, the nice thing is that it's part of the pattern, part of the sound even. So I can copy this sound to another track or another pattern, and the modulation destinations will move with it. So that's good to remember. I can even save this sound to my sound browser, and the modulation destinations will be there as well because they are part of the sound. So yeah, you can actually see how you can use that to your advantage. You could even sound lock stuff this way and have the modulation LFO set up, and the destination on the mod wheel matrix will be different, and each sound lock will have different effects depending on the sound and the modulation matrix destinations, but with an LFO that's doing the same, having the same movement, for instance. So you can see that you can do some crazy stuff with that. Also remember that you can set up 8 MIDI tracks on the Digitakt to modulate the same channel, right? So you could have 8 LFOs modulating the hell out of one track. I hope this explanation was clear, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions or any thoughts. I mean, maybe you have a better idea or even an idea to add on top of this idea. I would love to know that. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.